Did you experience that incredible honeymoon period after weight loss surgery where losing the weight came swiftly and then one day, blammo, you suddenly start struggling with old habits? Maybe some of the weight you lost even starts creeping back on. Even with this amazing tool you've been given, life after bariatric surgery isn't always smooth sailing. Life happens, and you're going to encounter some storms along the way. How do you get through life's challenges and maintain the progress you've worked so hard to make after bariatric surgery? I've been thinking a lot about that this week. I recently moved from California to the South. I haven't been here for even 3 months and we got struck by a tornado. Fortunately, it wasn't a direct hit, but nonetheless, I'm left with a hole in my roof and we lost 7 trees that were each between 30 and 50 feet tall in my yard. A couple snapped in half while others were totally uprooted. Why did some of the trees in my yard weather the storm while others succumbed to the torrential winds? Well, I'm certainly no expert on trees, but more than 19 years out from weight loss surgery, I do know a thing or two about weathering storms. I struggled with significant post-surgery regain for many years, and through trial and error, I figured out how to get back on track, lose the regain, and finally enjoy the right-size lifestyle. In doing so, I've discovered there are 3 things that will help you weather the storms you face on your post-surgery journey to achieve and maintain right-size living. Before I share what those 3 things are, please take a second to give the video a like if you're excited to learn what they are, and hit the subscribe button and the bell if you want to be notified each time I put out a new video for my bariatric buddies like you. Now about those trees, what lessons can you learn from them to weather the storms you encounter after weight loss surgery? 1, anchor your roots. Your roots are your foundation. It's not enough just to have roots. Those roots have got to be firmly anchored to empower you to hold strong through the tough storms. If those roots are not well anchored, like maybe they aren't deep enough or strong enough, or if you allow the soil around them to get oversaturated in muck or watered down, then you're at risk of toppling. After my gastric bypass 19 years ago, I got overconfident. My ego expanded. There I was, 131 pounds in a size 6. Not too shabby, right? In those first 6 months after surgery, I didn't have to deal with cravings. I didn't struggle against old habits. I was in that magic window that everybody talks about. I started to take my new physical shape for granted. I started getting loose with my doctor's nutritional guidelines and no longer paying close attention to what I was eating, when I was taking my vitamins, how much water I was getting in, or how much I was moving. I started getting a bit loosey-goosey with attending support groups regularly. Instead of strengthening my foundation, I was letting it get weak. The soil was getting watered down and muddy around those new roots I had begun to grow after surgery. So what happened? At 1 year post-op, I had already gained 10 pounds from my lowest weight. That is a terrifying feeling, experiencing regain after surgery. You start thinking, I can't go back. I just can't fathom the thought of having to experience life in my larger body again. Have you experienced any regain? If so, share in the comments below. Bottom line, you strengthen your roots by staying consistent with the process you established right after surgery. Paying attention to what you put in your mouth, following the nutritional guidelines your doctor gave you, treating your body to movement that keeps it strong, taking your supplements. I'm not saying you have to be perfect. All the power to anyone who can be. I, for one, am not willing to give up my chocolate, but I've learned to be consistent. Consistent for me is not perfect. I made a list of all the things I was supposed to do based on what my wellness experts told me. And I aim to achieve 90%, which means eating at least 90% nutritious, doing at least 90% of the recommended movement routines, getting to support groups 90% of the time, essentially trying to do everything where I would get an A grade if it were school, but leaving room for imperfection, leaving room for a little indulgence here and there. Maybe 90% sounds too high for you for where you're at today. Say you're sticking to about 50% of the guidelines your wellness team gave you on nutrition, exercise, and support. Simply try bumping it up to 55% and then bump it up to 60%. You do you, but start to strive for consistency over perfection to grow those roots strong. Number 2, be flexible. When the wind blows, do you notice how most trees will sway in the wind? Imagine if they didn't. If there was no flexibility, how much wind force could they withstand before snapping in two? Before moving to the South and experiencing the power of tornadoes, I was a California girl, and boy did I experience my fair share of earthquakes. About 25 years ago, I worked in a high-rise in downtown LA, and I'll never forget being in that building during a big aftershock. You could feel the building sway back and forth and back and forth. It swayed so far it made me dizzy, but the building was flexible. Engineers create flexibility so that the buildings can weather the earthquakes with less chance of breaking. I've discovered that you need to be flexible after bariatric surgery too. You need to be able to pivot when obstacles are thrown your way. What happens if you're so rigid that you live by that all or nothing mindset? What happens if something gets in your way of eating, moving, connecting to support, or anything else? Do you just give up? No, you find a workaround, you find an alternative. A great example is the COVID storm you've weathered. Did that sucker throw a big wrench into the post-surgery lifestyle you've created for yourself, or what? Share with me in the comments, did COVID throw you off your game a bit? And if so, how? I remember in the early days, remember how hard it was to find meat or fresh veggies at the grocery store? You had to pivot. You had to find nutritious alternatives that would work. They might not have been as tasty as your normal fare. They might not have been as good a quality, but you found a workaround. You found the next best thing so that you could weather the storm. How about exercise? I know a lot of you were thrown off your game on that during COVID. You might have relied on the local gym only to have it locked down. What then? Did you just say, oh well, I guess I have an excuse to be a couch potato? No, you had to pivot. You had to be flexible. You had to find another way to move or strengthen your body. When I couldn't go to the gym, I started hiking. I found workout videos on YouTube. That flexibility helped me weather the storm. I find it's good to think ahead. I know we can't predict everything. I mean, who would have predicted COVID? But there are many obstacles that you can predict. And for those challenges likely to head your way, I encourage you to create if-then scenarios. If A, B, or C happens, what will you do to navigate that obstacle? If my coworkers order pizza at the office, then maybe I'll put a dab of peppermint oil under my nose so I'm not tempted by the smell. If it rains outside and I can't get my walk in, then I'll do a YouTube chair yoga workout instead. If you think ahead with if-then scenarios, you'll be able to quickly pivot in the storms, whether it's just a light breeze or gale force winds. Be flexible and find the workaround. Number 3, protect against the rot. I was surprised to discover when surveying our trees that had fallen in the storm that one had rot in the middle of the trunk. It had looked perfectly healthy from the outside before the storm, but it wasn't so healthy on the inside. When it comes to right-sized living, you have to do everything you can to protect your brain from the rot. What do I mean by that? Well, it's important to carve out time to keep your mindset strong. Mindset covers a lot of ground, so let me share with you just one helpful hint to focus on to help prevent brain rot from occurring. Work on quieting the inner critic and activating the inner cheerleader. You know that voice that's always chattering away inside your head? A lot of times it gets pretty critical, doesn't it? You're probably way more critical of yourself than you ever would be of someone else. When you catch that inner voice saying things like, "You'll never be successful, so go ahead and eat the cookie," "You're too lazy," "You're not good enough," "You suck," stop that thought midstream and then replace that negative thought with something positive. Okay, yeah, you went off track and had the breakfast burrito, but now you've got an opportunity to eat a clean lunch. You've got this. If you catch yourself saying you suck, replace it with "You are worthy of living in a right-sized body." If you catch that voice saying you're lazy, replace it with one that says "I'll take action today." As a rule of thumb, replace your negative thoughts with what you would say to your best friend if he or she criticized themselves like your inner voice criticizes you. You wouldn't say, "Yeah, you're right, you suck," would you? At least I hope not. Instead, you'd encourage them, wouldn't you? You'd help them see how awesome they are. Replace the negative inner critic thoughts with what a best friend would say to you. That single move will help you prevent brain rot, so you can weather any storm. I'll tell you what, this has been really heartbreaking to see these majestic trees fail to weather the recent storm, but like challenges in life, there were lessons to be learned. One thing is for sure, you will face storms after bariatric surgery. That's just part of life. But if you grow those roots deep to build a strong foundation, you'll learn to be flexible and pivot when faced with challenges, and you protect against rot by becoming aware of negative thoughts and replacing them with positive ones, then you have a great chance of weathering any storm. Until next time, my friend, live with purpose, live with courage, and live with delight.